Okay, we are going to go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's presentation on food deserts in rural Nebraska. My name is Kristen Jansen, and I am an AmeriCorps member serving with Conservation Nebraska's Common Ground program. Conservation Nebraska's mission is to protect our state's natural legacy by educating the public, supporting communities, and increasing civic engagement, which we accomplish through locally led education efforts and community engagement projects to address local conservation concerns. Before tonight's speakers, there's just a few housekeeping things I'm going to go over. So your cameras will remain off and you will be muted throughout the presentation. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat or the Q&A, and they will be answered at some point during or after the presentation. Following the presentation, we'll have a brief survey that should only take less than a minute to complete. The survey helps support programming like this one, so we appreciate you taking the time to fill those out. If anyone in attendance is interested in speaking with a Conservation Nebraska member regarding conservation issues in Nebraska, to find out more about what we do or to learn more about our organization, I will put the email in the chat and you can reach out to us. Tonight, we welcome Sean, Cindy, Deborah, and Charlotte, who are all going to talk about food deserts in rural Nebraska and what's being done to reduce them. So I will go ahead and let them take it away.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sean Caskey, and I am an extension educator with the Rural Prosperity Nebraska program. I'm also a former AmeriCorps Vista member, so Kristen and I share that in common, and working on a PhD in leadership at UNL as well. When I'm not doing those things, I kind of nerd out on maps, and so you're going to see a lot of maps today and talk about some exciting research that we've done in collaboration with my partners, Cindy, Charlotte, and Deborah, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
Hi, I'm Cindy Holden. I'm a cooperative development specialist with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center. And part of the work we do at NCDC is with local foods as well as rural grocery stores. So we're going to talk about the work we do there. Deborah. Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Nargis, and I'm with the Nebraska Cooperative Development Center also, and a colleague of Cindy and Sean. We all work together a lot, as well as Deborah.
Deborah, are you dialed in, or do you want me to introduce you? Oh, I need to unmute you. It's not letting me unmute you.
Give me 1 second and I will unmute her. Is it under your name, Deborah?
It's the 405 phone number, I think. It's the only phone number. We love technology when it works. Okay, Deborah.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Excellent. Thank you so much for your patience. I'm having technical difficulties on my end, so I really appreciate Kristen's flexibility as well as my fellow panelists. I work with the Center for Rural Affairs, and I'm proud to represent them tonight as part of this panel and enjoy working with Sean, Cindy, and Charlotte as we address food deserts through some work we're doing with producers and grocery stores, as well as engaging with the community. And we'll learn more about that as we get into the presentation. So thank you so much.
With that, I think I'm up first to talk about a little bit of research that we've been doing with in sponsorship from the Center for Rural Affairs and UNL Cooperative Development Center and the Nebraska Rural Grocery Association. So I have to give the university's disclaimer that what I say today might not be representative of the university or the sponsors of this study that we conducted last summer. And so is everybody seeing my screen? Just maybe we got a thumbs up. Wonderful. I'm getting some thumbs up. A little bit of history. Before this job and one before that, I used to be the Loop City, Sherman County Economic Development Director for our Nebraska friends. And we have a wonderful grocery store in the city. There's also a small one in Litchfield. It's also in Sherman County. And so we do have a couple, and you can see if you look really closely that the bright green box in the middle of the state is Sherman County. You can see two dark black dots in there. That is Luke City and Litchfield, where there are still grocery stores. And then the other really highly green box is Cherry County, where you can see there is only one dot, one grocery store. There's actually, there used to be a couple in Valentine, and there may be a couple there. I'm not 100% sure on that. But we did a similar sort of case study with a friend of mine, the former dean of the business college, who's also a market research PhD, Tim Burking, back in 2012. And we kind of compared, and we came up, they saw the USDA had this map, which you'll see in the old food desert map there in figure 1, showing that Nebraska, all of sort of the sandhills, but not Cherry County, was part of a food desert. So Tim and I, Tim has, his dad owned a store in Scribner and in Lexington. So he comes from a grocery store family. It's like, we can do a better job with this. And so we set off to do some interviews and interview store owners. And I was contracted to interview 40 grocery store owners back then in 2010. And we started to argue that, in fact, we can improve on the USDA's definition of what a food desert is. And so I'm going to go ahead and start by, if my screen will let me slide screen, there we go. This is what the USDA says the food deserts were, based on having low or no food access, no grocery store within the county, or no grocery store within, excuse me, it has to meet two definitions: unaffordable and less than 20% of the population in a census tract, which is in most rural counties, the census tract is the county line, and when the median family income in the census tract is less than 80% of the state median. So based on those criteria, these pink areas in today's definition are food deserts. And here we can see it's got most of Custer County listed as those, although you can clearly see by the grocery store icons that there are grocery stores. In fact, I work out of Custer County office in Broken Bow. There is now only one store in Broken Bow, but there is one in Anselmo, there's one in Arnold, there is one in Callaway, and there is one in Sargent. So in fact, there are 5 stores in Custer County, and so we would argue it's not a food desert. So what are we going to do about that? We'll talk a little bit about what we set out to kind of make our own. Before we kind of get into that, I'd like to talk about some factors affecting food access. And so my colleague, Greg McKee, who used to be a UNL professor, is now a BYU Idaho professor. We did some research this summer where we kind of dug into this a little bit more. And Greg is an economist, specifically focused on cooperative business economists. And I think Charlotte and Cindy might talk a little bit more about him later. But he and I partnered on this study that we did this summer, and we found that there was a number of factors that really affect food access. I'll get to the final product in a few minutes, but here, being affordable depends on a number of things, which I'll go over in a little more detail in the next few slides. That, of course, the number of consumers, which is probably tied to the population, and we'll see that. Spending potential to afford those things is another factor, and I'll go over some slides. And then, of course, there's these retail supply factors, and we're excited that Charlotte and Cindy and colleagues have a pilot project that we might be trying that we learned from our colleagues in North Dakota, and we'll kind of cover that later in this presentation. So I'm going to go on to some of these factors that we talked about, and some of the obvious ones is population. Lower population areas are going to have a harder time supporting stores, and you can sort of see that, like in Nebraska, the higher population areas follow the interstate, Omaha, Lincoln, no surprises there. But not just population itself, but the decline, the trend in population, and even our rural areas are becoming more rural, which is kind of a problem because without people to shop at their grocery stores, it's going to be hard to sustain those. And then, of course, aging patterns. This bottom picture here shows where we have a higher percentage of senior citizens, which tend to have a less of a disposable income. And so you can see Cuyahoga County, and then up here, North Wheeler County, Garfield County, Sherman County, where I was, have higher than average. Some of our panhandle counties have higher average ages than other ones. And so that's another factor. So digging down a little bit into factors, education level, we found that education levels do correlate with demand for grocery stores. Higher education levels are associated with higher demand for nutritious foods, according to our study results. And so, places with a four-year college like Buffalo County, which is dark red in the center, and the county below it have a higher than average percentage of people with bachelor's degree, which is what this map shows, and also more grocery stores and a higher demand for farmers markets, which is very nutritious fresh food. And then, of course, household size affects that. Again, very similar to the pattern about average age. A younger, as folks age and spouses pass on, our household size gets smaller. And so we have smaller household sizes in our very rural counties, very similar to the map with the average age. And once we're just looking at this bottom map, which is the average household size, and our larger household size tend to be in the urban areas, as well as our families, our Hispanic families tend to have higher families. So this darker one in the middle is Dawson County with Lexington, and then Hall County, Grand Island, and then the county just west of Lincoln, I can't remember, with Crete. There's a high Hispanic population. That's why those higher than average household size show up in that bottom map. And so in the bottom line with some of these factors, that food demand must be large enough for retailers to be profitable. So we're going to get in a little bit more on this. And so in order to talk about profit, we have to have disposable income to buy food. And this map at the top here in this slide shows the disposable income per capita in Nebraska. And, unsurprisingly, we have higher incomes and higher disposable income in our metro areas like Omaha and Lincoln. But there are some areas like Banner County and even Cherry County and Cuyahoga where they're higher than average disposable income, which one of our challenges with the way the USDA defined a food desert was based on income. And as many of you on the phone or call know, many of our rural households are farm families, and they operate on deferred income schedules. A lot of our farm families have a deferred income tax schedule. And so income doesn't always represent the wealth and disposable income that might be in a household. And so we're trying to look at different factors. In this case, disposable income, and I'll get into this a little bit. Net worth is what I'll show you in a little bit. And this bottom map here is the unemployment rate. And, again, the unemployment rate in the Panhandle, where we have more construction trades or a higher population. Some of our utilities like gas, oil, and mining have higher layoff percentages than maybe other areas. So this map on the bottom shows counties with higher than average unemployment rates. But Nebraska as a whole is just always well below 4%, which most economists would say is below ideal employment. 4% is a good employment rate because it makes folks that want a job to find a job. And so Nebraska is doing pretty good as far as unemployment goes. So one of the other things, and my colleagues Charlotte and Cindy and Deborah will say, is we want folks to have a number of resources that they'll talk about in a few moments. But we did a statewide survey of grocery stores and their communities in 2022. And we asked the managers or their board presidents, if there was help available, would you take that help to transition or to sell the store? And what you're seeing in this map with the little bubbles on here, the darker colored circles on here, meaning that owner or that board member said that they were more open to help, like they would accept help to sell their store or transition the store. And in the areas with a lighter colored bubbles. In the Northeast, there's quite a few. They were less open to help, and thought they were okay. And so being open to help, we found in our study, is really important to be able to find if a grant comes to be available, or if there's money for planning, or like Cindy will share a little bit, if there's other resources and a whole network of support, you'll be able to be connected for those supports when they're available. And so the other thing when we talk about access to nutritious and healthy food is farmers markets. So here you can see the zip codes in purple that have a farmers market. Again, these are seasonal, but the little stores here show where there's the Summers Farmers Market in Nebraska. And these, at least in the summer when they're operating, provide another access of healthy food while available. Unfortunately, though, these aren't enough, because in Nebraska, we can only sell at those farmers markets for about 2 to 3 months a year. But we did factor that into our study results. And so this map, again, sort of overlays, oh, I think I have a duplicate here, so I'm going to skip on to that one. So here's what we learned from our study. When we overlaid the existing stores, which you can see here, the existing stores in Nebraska are by the little grocery store icon, with, instead of using income like the USDA did, we use the factor of net worth. And specifically, we use the projected factor of what's a statistic called the average value of other financial assets, which is like a proxy variable for the net worth. And for those that were the zip code, the median net worth was less than, the average net worth of a person was less than $1 million for the entire zip code. Sorry, the total net worth for the zip code is under $1 million. That showed up in a colored bracket, meaning those are sort of lower net worth areas. If there's a color on this, like the hues of orange and red, that means the zip code has an average net worth, or is projected to have one, of less than $1 million for the entire zip code. And we overlaid that with, of course, the grocery store icons you can see. And then in the back, there's still the pink, and that's the original USDA food desert definitions. And so you can see by this map that, wow, there's a lot of orange. That means we're saying that in 2028, all these places are going to be food deserts, or have it, let's just say, I'm not predicting for sure. You can't own me for anything, but our study results show that these areas have a higher proficiency for being food deserts. And the darker the color, the lower the net worth of that zip code, meaning it's harder for a store owner to be profitable, if that makes sense. And so you'll look, though, most of these colored areas don't have a store. There's not grocery stores, and with a couple exceptions, the Hegler and Henley way down in Southwest here do have a store. And those are the ones that, as we think about programs at the state level, policy and programs, we would want to target those places, save those stores to keep that access, right? So that's where this map can get put to work by our policymakers, by our resource providers. And I hope that it does. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on in the presentation with my colleagues. We mapped all this out and did provide this full study, which I need to put in the chat for everyone. For those of you who want to nerd out with this with me, you can go ahead and look at the link and see the full study, which is listed on the Center for Rural Affairs, and Charlotte, I believe, has it on her cooperative development website. And you can see the list of the communities where it's going to be a struggle for them to have one. Most of these in red do not have a store. But the good news is some of these smaller places are increasing population and net worth, and that's the ones on the green. So the chance of these folks on the far right of the screen coming out of being a food desert is greater than the ones, these communities on the left side of the screen. And let's see here. And so what do we want to, in transition, as we talk about resources, our study found that the declining number of stores indicate a pattern of persistent food deserts. In fact, the way we use net worth instead of income, it's actually more pervasive than we originally thought, which is probably no surprise to most of you on the phone, but we need to have a more specific, if we're going to be offering policy money, the state is considering a programming to support stores. We want to be as kind of precise as we can. And so our study results show that, in fact, 48 Nebraska counties have some of those colored areas that I showed in the map. But the silver lining here that the colleagues will talk about is that willingness to work with other partners, communities, having mentors, having support can delay the steps for closure. And what I've learned as both a practitioner and researcher is that effective solutions seem to be the local ones. And so if you have a community development process where we ask people what they want, we get folks involved. The cooperative process is one, but there are several more community supported options to keep that food service and healthy food service viable. And so I'm gonna stop there, and you will see on the left side of the screen that one of the wonderful resources that I'm going to get Charlotte and Cindy will talk about is sort of a timeline. So if a community is thinking of transitioning a store, we have these wonderful if-then transition models to look at, as well as many other resources that I think Cindy and Charlotte and Deborah will talk about. For now, I'm going to stop it there and let them talk, and we'll cover some questions at the end.
All right, I'm gonna get my screen loaded up. Can you guys see this now?
I can, Cindy, but you're in the presentation mode. Oh, there, it's perfect.
Is it now? Is it good now? Perfect, perfect.
It's great.
You know, you gotta love computers. So, as I said, my name's Cindy Holden, and I'm with Deborah Soley and Charlotte Nargis. And we are proud to be Sean's colleagues. As a matter of fact, I happen to be Sean's neighbor. So, you know, I've known him a long time. But we're just going to talk about some solutions to navigating Nebraska's food desert, solutions that we've identified through our work at NCDC and through our collaboration with Center for Rural Affairs. So one thing we always like to say initially when we begin talking from NCDC is, what do we mean by when we say cooperative? Because we're going to talk a lot about how we're cooperating and working together to find a solution. So an easy definition, and this is thanks to Charlotte, is according to the Oxford Dictionary, it's working or acting together for a common purpose or benefit. So that's the work we're doing right now in mitigating these food deserts, is we're working together. Our goal is food in rural communities, and not just food, but livability. Access to food is essential in a community. It just makes it more livable. If you think about, if you have to drive, 20, 30, 40 minutes to the grocery store, the time that takes out of your day or it takes out of your weekend, especially people that are busy. If you can get access to your groceries in your hometown, it really makes your community more livable. So here at NCDC, these are just some of the stores we've worked with. You might recognize some of them. We've got Charlotte, jump in. What's the name of the store in Lynch? I cannot think of it.
Valley Foods Cooperative.
Valley Foods Cooperative. Thank you.
Left.
It doesn't have the name on the front of the building, so I'm lost. And then Post 60 Market, it's in Emerson, Nebraska. We've got the Stapleton Cooperative Market and Deli in Stapleton. We've got the Cody Kilgore Grocery Store, which is actually a partnership between local government and the Cody Kilgore school system. And then we've got the Centennial Market Cooperative in Utica, Farm to Family Co-op in Hayes Springs, Nebraska, or Hayes Springs, Nebraska, and Henke's in Paxton, Nebraska. This is just a few. NCDC has worked with 24 rural grocery stores, and we've successfully transitioned 13 of them into a co-op or community supported model. And they're all still operating and serving their communities. Additionally, under NCDC, we have what's called Buy Fresh, Buy Local Nebraska. It's a network, a membership network with currently, I just checked today, 91 members, Hopefully that will be growing because we're getting ready to do our membership drive. And there's a list of potential new members, but we can't announce them until they actually join. But it is a statewide network. You can get to it at buylocalnebraska.org. Quite a few of those farmers markets that Sean listed on his research are members, as are the producers that sell through those farmer markets. And so one of our goals within our project is connecting the rural grocery stores to the food. And so I'm going to let Deborah take over.
Thanks, Cindy. As we have really looked at this, the challenges that rural grocery stores are experiencing and that have really been well outlined by Sean. So thank you for your presentation, Sean. You can see whether it's aging infrastructure or thin profit margins or challenging, just challenges in the community and changing demographics. It is difficult to continue to operate a rural grocery store, but yet it is so vital to our food systems and access to food. So one of the ways that we are addressing this and have been thinking of ways we can do this is a partnership with the Sherwood Foundation. They provide grants, as Cindy has provided here, that help Nebraska be a better place to live, work, learn, and play. And through their funding, we have been able to work in various areas of this particular problem. And one is, and if you look on the screen, Cindy has added a map of Nebraska with dots. And Cindy, are these the dots in our cohort or are these different dots?
No, these are actually where Sherwood has grants.
Oh,
This is actually
that's
the Sherwood Foundation's webpage, and I thought it looked cute. It might not be as cool as Sean's maps, but it's a cool map.
It's a very cool map, and we needed to compete well with Sean, so I appreciate that. Yes, they are invested across the state, and that's partly why they wanted to really invest in this project, because it's something that impacts, as you can see, all different areas. So I think, Cindy, was the next slide, was that where we get more into?
We'll get more into the cohort that the project.
Okay.
So the Sherwood Foundation funded us, provided a grant to Center for Rural Affairs to create a collaboration that would help us respond to the challenges through the development of a producer cohort and a rural grocery store cohort, as well as connect into communities for listening sessions within grocery education. And so this again is thanks to Charlotte. I love the quote she comes up with. She's one of those people. And we have to remember this as we go forward, that each situation is different. So basically each community is different and each producer is different with respect to their market conditions, financial interests, and the willingness of their residents to invest or otherwise participate in financing a project. This is key to our work in cooperatives, but it's also key to this conversation because the communities have to look at themselves. If they want to no longer be a food desert, they are going to have to choose not to be. We can't just open a grocery store in their community and they have groceries. They have to support that grocery store because, as Sean said in his research, without support, those stores will not be successful. So, we can throw money and resources and the weight of the university and the Center for Rural Affairs behind this, but without commitments from the communities, from the partners at the grassroots, we cannot solve this problem. So as I alluded to, and these brochures are thanks to Deborah because Cindy is not creative at all. There are two cohorts. One is completed, as in the initial sessions are completed, which is the producers, which should be on one side of your screen. I'm not sure which side. I can never remember how screens are. But what this cohort's purpose was, well, I'm going to let you talk about it, Deborah. You know more than I do.
Oh, sure. So the producer, so one of the challenges that we see is really getting access to quality, healthy, nutritious produce. And that can be a challenge depending, especially where that grocery store is located, how long it takes for them to get a truck, all of the different things that that grocery store is navigating. So one thing, and on the other hand, we have producers who are looking for new retail outlets for their produce. And they might be making other things. They might be making granola, or they maybe have honey, or they have other things that they are producing that would like to reach a wider audience. So they're looking to wholesale their products. And often, especially if they're in a rural area, a rural grocery store is a great way for them to get a wider audience for their products, but also for that grocery store to be able to source some items that they're not able to get necessarily through their wholesaler, or at least get fresher options. So this really helped. We had farmers that participated from all across the state, and we walked them through the steps of scaling up their operations and what it would take to do that, including how to approach a grocer, how to have an effective pricing and sales strategy, because if you've been used to doing direct to market, you're not used to a wholesale option. And also working with the public in a different way, and working with someone who has a different system. So we walk through all of those steps and answer any questions they might have, and have opportunities for them to gather and meet grocers one-on-one, so they have a chance to learn more. So that is kind of our first step in this process of helping producers, but also helping address that food system within some of our rural areas. And then that leads us to our rural grocery store learning cohort. And I'll turn it back to you, Cindy, if you want to talk a little bit about that.
I'm actually going to turn it to Charlotte.
Ah, perfect.
Because she is probably the most knowledgeable on the grocery cohort.
I don't know about that, but Cindy, thanks. I was ready to listen here and throw in things in the chat. The Rural Grocery Store Learning Cohort, it's something actually at NCDC we've been wanting to do for a long time, is to connect our grocers together, and the opportunity that we were able to work with the center has been great. We identified, we have I think 17 grocers that we're meeting, and we're meeting with them 8 times, and identifying different topics from community engagement to get people with a higher basket size, to financial, and introducing new models too. But it really is a collaborative. We want them to learn from each other. We're halfway through the cohort, and we've received really positive feedback. And I think one of the things that we'll be looking at in the future is where do we go from here, and what other things to continue working with these stores. Right now, we're primarily working with communities that are under 1,000. We had a connection with every grocery store of some sort that were invited. Because of this grant, the way it came out, we didn't have an application process. So in the future, that may be something that with the Center for Rural Affairs we might explore. But the opportunity happened, and it's been exciting. And to see the challenges, which Sean really alluded to it, and is from the financial perspective of availability of the risk, I guess, of number of people with affordable income to do it. But when you think about rural grocery stores, it's education to everyone that lives in a town how valuable that community store is. And when it's 1 cent on a dollar is all that return on investment comes back, you can see why the cooperative model and other community supported efforts are needed to make it successful, especially in our communities that are under 1,500. And we're exploring many other models, but for now, I'll turn it back to Cindy and where we were going to go there.
Perfect. Thanks, ladies. As I tell my students, I get tired of listening to my own voice, so I like other people to chime in. Now, Sean may be the map nerd, but I decided to create my own maps. So those purple dots are the zip code areas of the grocery stores that are in our cohort. And you'll notice there is some overlap with the areas Sean identified as having food deserts. So the grocery stores that are rural and in our cohort are in those areas that have the potential to lose access to food. And when I see his map and our map together, that really strengthens to me why we're doing what we're doing. These stores need to work together to be successful. And as Sean alluded to, we're working on a couple projects to help them access food, access resources to be more successful. We really can't share a lot right now. This is the first step. There's more steps, but this is something that we need to do in order to be successful, because these areas without these stores, you will see a change in their access to food. And then these are the producers. And what I noticed right away is we don't have producers in the Panhandle or in the areas that Sean identified, which that doesn't mean there aren't local producers there. That just means we didn't connect them into the cohort. So a couple things will probably need to happen. We'll need to continue to reach out and connect with them. But there's also an opportunity for local producers in these areas to have a market, especially if we have the ability to connect those producers into the rural stores that we're connected to. So there's some great opportunities. And I'm just going to share, these are our 3 contact information. I know that Kristen will share out information later, but if you have any questions, ideas, want us to work with you, you know, we are an email away, all 3 of us. If one of us can't answer the question, hopefully one of the other 2 can. And I'm going to stop right there and turn it back over to Kristen.
Yes, thank you so much. I am going to go ahead and launch the survey. So if you guys could just take a little bit of time to fill that out. And if there are any questions that you might have, you can put them in the chat. The webinar is recorded, and so it will be put on our YouTube page in a couple of weeks. And we will also send out an email just with some follow-up information that will also include the link to that. I did have a question. So, I see that you guys are working with people who are currently who have grocery stores. But is there like a plan for the future to try and help encourage people if they're interested in starting a grocery store, like resources for them?
Yes, we're always aware of that. And through both NCDC as well as Center for Rural Affairs, you know, if you want to start a business in your community, even through Sean with Rural Prosperity Nebraska, we're there to support you. There is a store, and she's actually a member of the cohort up in Anselmo. And I believe Sean was her first contact. She reached out to Sean, wanted to start a grocery store in Anselmo. He connected her with Charlotte and I. We visited with her, and Jessie, she's a joy to have in the cohort. The first session she was in my group, and she goes, I don't really know if I know what I'm talking about, but I'm here. She brings a wealth of knowledge to the cohort. So yes, you know, we're there if you need our help. We're here.
Steve Tyler has asked a question about community gardens, and I don't think that we have data on community gardens, just farmers markets, which I can share and put that map up there. And then the next question, has Amazon had the ability, a bit of a store be had the ability of brick and mortar? Yes,
Not just Amazon. The threat we see more is from Thrive, the groceries, like Thrive Market, where you get your groceries or meals in a box that come in and you get them delivered to your house. They're more of a threat. Also, Walmart, if Walmart is close to a rural community and they offer delivery into that community, that can be a threat as well. And then along with the community gardens, I didn't mention this, but one of the things that our rural stores are concerned about is in order for them to be served by their suppliers, they have to have what are called weekly minimums. If they bring in food from an outside source, so someone who's not one of their suppliers, be it Associated Wholesale Grocers, Affiliated Foods, Cashway, etc., they could lose access to their whole supply chain. And so when we talk about bringing in local foods, they're excited, but they can't cannibalize what they're getting from their supplier. So that's one of the solutions we're trying to work on, is how do we bring local foods into these stores while helping them maintain the minimums they have to have. And there's a couple strategies you can do for that. Charlotte threw up in the chat a model that North Dakota is looking at, and it's called a RAD model. And that's something that we're exploring, helping some of our stores. She also threw up how dollar stores impact rural grocery stores. And those are just things that it happens. But Tyler, you're right. Community gardens could be such a great resource in small communities, especially low-income communities. It's just, these are things that communities have to problem solve for themselves.
I was going to add to that, Cindy, that I have seen that in some communities, particularly if they're looking at how to provide fresh produce to their local pantry. So that is like local food pantry, but I have not necessarily seen that as a way to put into their grocery store or other retail outlets, but then more of a they're raising the food as a donation, as a way of helping support the community. Community gardens, I think, are a great option. Probably the biggest challenge that I've heard is that finding volunteers and finding folks to staff and weed and plant and going through the season is their biggest challenge. And so sometimes those can fall off. So that's where they are looking for some assistance. But, and Sean, you had that up on the screen, so I want you to go ahead and share what you were wanting to share there, if you'd like to talk more about that.
No, I mean, the data, we don't have data on community gardens. We do have data on farmers markets, and that's what was just on the screen. I can put it back up if I need to, but I shared that earlier. So we have a lot of support from farmers market, and I think the Buy Fresh, Buy Local, and there's an app on a Rural Prosperity website called, is it Market Maker, Cindy, Charlotte, where they can actually connect direct. Maybe one of us can find a website for that Market Maker platform on our rural food systems, in case folks are interested in that. And then our question, as we're finding that website for Market Maker, less waste. I would say that the majority of our stores already are pretty efficient. Like, they do whatever they can, and they order food specifically based on their customer base. Like, they custom order food. Most of our owners, or especially our small towns, have the ability to do that. That's the good thing about being small, is you can be nimble with respect to specific orders. As long as there's demand for it and they're making money on it, they might not order a product more than once, as long as they're meeting the thresholds.
In other states where they're more population, I'm thinking of some examples in Illinois, they have more healthy foods options where they don't have maybe all of the regular products. But one of the things we found in our small rural communities, they need groceries too. We can't just have the local foods options. And so when we've worked with our stores, so they need everything. I don't know if I'm, yeah, but we're in some of these towns in Illinois is where I'm thinking where they really worked at just having the healthy foods options. They are more populous areas, even though they're in rural, and they have struggled as well. As when people, once they go into one store, they're going to buy their other things if it's not there and available, especially in our rural communities. You know, I think of, I'm not sure what you mean by less desirable, but I'm thinking maybe pop and sugar and other processed foods.
So here's the Market Maker. Somebody had asked about fresh foods, and this is a way that our community gardens, if they want to start selling another way, this is an opportunity for them to try that. And there's a website, if you go to Rural Prosperity, and this is under Rural Tools when you go to the general website here. And then you can find this market maker app. So if you know folks that have community gardens and want to try to find a farmer's market to sell it, there are a number of resources out there, including the buy fresh, buy sell. And you have to create a profile and do some other steps. Hope that helps.
I also wanted to chime in a little bit and bring it back to the Dollar General link that Charlotte had posted, just to say that that is one thing we have heard, particularly in our cohort, is Dollar General is becoming almost ubiquitous in every small town, and that can be very frightening for a rural grocery store. In fact, one of our prisoners said that they had a Dollar General that they had just been in business a few years, they'd taken over, or they had just built it, and a Dollar General went up right across the street from them. And so they had to kind of rethink some of their marketing strategies and some of those pieces. And so I think that is the real challenge. And some Dollar Generals do have some expanded produce areas and food areas, but it's just not the, I can say pretty frankly that that's just not access to the healthy and nutritious foods that a grocery store can provide. And so that kind of goes back to what Charlotte is saying, where you know, if you're buying something, you want to be able to buy it all at one place, or you just want to be able to be sure that you're able to tell your story and why you're important to that community as a grocery store, in order to share that this is what you're providing is healthy, nutritious foods. You're providing a community gathering spot. You're important to your community, and that support is important too. And the local, and that money stays locally, whereas Dollar General, the money goes back. So like there's a lot of ways to, I think, differentiate yourself between some of these challenging, like Walmart or some of Amazon, some of the things we've talked about, but it does take being able to tell your story. And that's difficult when you're already an incredibly busy grocer who's working 60 to 80 hours a week. So I think that's just something I wanted to mention as well. And I don't know if, Charlotte, you had anything to add to that around that challenge.
No, good job, Deborah.
The other thing I would just put up on the screen here is the regional food systems, and there is a regional food. I don't know, are the grants are still available for the business builders one? Charlotte, Cindy, I don't want to sell something.
What I heard today in another meeting is the grant is being reviewed right now and on hold, but they feel positive that they're going to be releasing it to them. All the those that are going to be receiving grants have been identified, but I heard that in another meeting that they're hopeful that they will soon be released.
That's another funding source for community garden type growers out there. Their website is listed here if you want more information on it. Put it in the chat for folks.
Well, thank you so much. If there aren't any other questions, I don't see anything else in the chat. I really appreciate you guys being here. It's such a unique topic that I don't think a lot of people think too much about until it affects them. So I think that it's something that a lot of people should learn about, and it's nuanced, and there's a lot of factors that go into it.
Kristen, one thing I just thought of is we've spent most of our time talking about rural Nebraska and the food, but I think there's been a lot of interest in Omaha too, and there's probably a number of people there and exploring how to get more local foods options in Omaha and food stands. And that's been challenging as well. And it's, yeah. And I don't think I'm not, that could be another topic that you'd have with people that have been really working on that one. Deborah probably can talk further than I can because we primarily work in rural.
I see in the chat somebody, Melinda asked about the intersection of lack of transportation and rural food deserts. We did look at that. The statistics show that the vast majority, like 90% of the population can drive in rural areas. Sometimes not always legally, right? So, but they're getting around some way, and so so there is, of course, we feel for those that don't have access, but that's the same reason why you don't see the rideshare sort of programs in communities, villages populated lower than 900. It's just there's not enough demand for transportation to get there. So yeah, we looked at that, but there's not a lot of options for those very remote rural areas. I'm just curious, what's the status of the LB 374 about programming for communities to help with planning around the food desert topic, Cindy, Charlotte?
I think Carly's on. I think I saw that. She and Audrey, they'd be better able to give an update on that.
If folks wanted to take action, I just wanted to empower the folks on the call with some direction that way. If somebody that could speak to that would be great. I don't think Carly's listed as a panelist. So.
Yeah, I don't know if Chris, we can unmute. Oh,
There she is.
Carly just posted. Okay. And Carly did just post an update.
I did give her the ability to unmute. So if you do want to talk about that for a second, Carly, you can unmute yourself.
Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, so the bill is LB 375 that was introduced by Senator Teresa Ibaugh. And this is the second year the Center for Rural Affairs has worked with her on, and NCDC and Sean have been really helpful with our work on that because we also did an interim study. That bill is currently stuck in committee, and just with all the budgetary conversations this year, it's a very tight budget year, so likely will not move forward this year, but we're hopeful next year we might have a rosier outlook, but it's still an issue that the Center for Rural Affairs will be working on with our partners.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that information about that. Obviously, there's a lot of things that go into food deserts, and rural and urban areas obviously have different challenges that they have to meet. So
I just want to say, Kristen, thank you for inviting us. We're always happy to tell the work we're doing, and we're always looking for collaborators, people to work with us and help us get this work done.
yes, thank you so much for everyone being here. Yeah, it was a really interesting topic. I learned a lot, and yeah, thank you so much.
Sorry, one more thing. August 21st, there's going to be the Nebraska Rural Grocery Summit. If anyone's interested in coming to that, the Nebraska Grocery Industry Association is the lead partner. That's another group that we work with a lot. And we're building the agenda now and should have a lot of interesting presentations again. And if this is a topic that you're really interested in participating.
Perfect.
All right. Thank you so much.
I was going to say the other thing, if you want to learn how to be a community champion, many of you asking are very good questions, and learn how to do that actually. And next week in North Platte, there's going to be you learn about how to positively support your community. There's going to be a lot of other folks that are interested in improving their community at our Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities Conference in North Platte. I just posted.
And we'll all be there.
That, yep, all of us on the call will be there. So come see us and learn some more from your peers. Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank you, you too.